Hi, I am near 200 reads this year, which is crazy, especially considering my goal was 85 and the amount that I read last year was 80, so crazy work on my end, well done me. But I wanted to go through all the 5 stars that I've read this year, and I have a couple videos coming out before the year ends about similar subjects, so I may repeat myself, but I hope you stick with me because I feel like all these books are really worth mentioning. It's literally just a list of books. It could be just done very simply in text format, but I like to talk about these, so I won't talk too much about each one, but I will briefly go into all of them, so let's talk about it. First one was Wild Houses by Colin Barrett. This was sent to me, the ARC was sent to me, which is crazy because it's now like one of the best books this year, you know, on all those lists and stuff. Definitely not what I would usually pick up, so I'm very grateful it got sent to me because I loved it. It was brilliant. The Door-to-Door Bookstore by Carsten Henn. If you follow me, I talk about this book all the time. This book made me cry. It brought out my inner child. It is just like the perfect, soft, cozy book. Kind of reminded me of like Madeline, which I used to watch as a kid, so it was just very nostalgic vibes for me. Completely loved it. The Cervical Awakening by Self Cervix. I am literally the person who put this book on like loads of book websites, because it's literally like 20 pages long, and I don't think a lot of people would count it as a book necessarily, but it is an ebook by Olivia, who is a friend of mine who owns Self Cervix, and it's just a great kind of like info book about the cervix. Pretty self-explanatory, but it's true. I just think it was really informative, and I think everyone should know what she's writing about. Cabin Porn Inside by Frida Moon. Love this book. Love the prequel book as well. I will get all of these books if they continue to release more, so that's gonna happen then. Then I have Trust Me by Raina Bell. I didn't expect to like this. I just feel like anything that has a cover like this with like a jacked guy and it's like a stock photo vibes, I like. It's like total opposite of what I like usually, but also kind of a guilty pleasure, kind of. But it was really good. The writing was brilliant, and I just found it like a proper like guilty pleasure read that was good, that I liked. Then this was a surprising one for me. That was a 5 stars. The Final Act of Juliet Willoughby by Ellery Lloyd, because I hated Ellery Lloyd's first book, which was People Like Her. People Like Her was absolute trash, but this one was a 5 star. It was very much so like Secret History vibes, which I love, so this for me was just spot on. It was sent to me, but I said to the publishers, I was like, I hated the first book, so I'm gonna be brutally honest. And they were fine with that, and then I loved it, and I also got to speak to the authors, which is actually a married couple, and it was great. It was really, really good. Then another one that I didn't expect to like, and I think this makes me sound like an arsehole because of the cover. Like, I do judge a book by its cover, okay, I do. But Conflicting Loyalties by Aidan Gabor literally got DM'd by, I think, his publicist, and it was like a small publicist that I've never heard of, or like they made an account purely for the book, something like that, and I was like, sure, I'll read it, like whatever, I'll read anything, which I do usually, and it was actually really good. It was a memoir of Aidan Gabor, I believe, I think, but the writing was fantastic and the story was so interesting. I just think they need to fix the cover, like severely fix the cover. Then of course, who would I be if I didn't like this book? On Earth We're Briefly Gorgeous by Ocean Vuong. What a lovely book. I really get scared going into reading books like this because I feel like they're so overrated oversaturated, because once something like this becomes popular, a million other writers try and write like that or try to do stories like that. I could give you a million examples of that. For example, Youth Juice and Self-Care, they're just like copy paste of the same books. It's just boring. But this one, I feel like actually lived up to its hype, so it was lovely. And I also feel like it's telling that it's like the original of that kind of storytelling. I'm not saying it's like the most unique book in the world, because it's not, but I just think it was very clearly not like a copy paste kind of book, which is important considering I read 200 books a year now apparently. Then I did a read along with Book Break, I believe, on Sociopath by Patrick Gagne, and this was incredible. And I heard really good reviews before I read this, and I also think like we did the audiobook, and I think it's also worth listening to the audiobook because it's done, I believe, by Patrick Gagne herself, so you can really sense like how it's meant to be read and how it was written. It's another memoir, and she's like a diagnosed sociopath, but it really separates this whole like idea that sociopaths equal psychopaths, because the two are heavily linked, but it doesn't equal the same thing. And it was, as someone who's super interested in true crime, and a lot of that talks about sociopathy and psychopathy, it was really interesting to get another perspective. Like, that shit is just so me, I love it. So yeah, it was brilliant and I highly recommend. Fighting Fate by Charlie Copner. Again, these covers, please change them, my lord, but it was so good. It was like pure Wattpad, The Fault in Our Stars vibes. I loved it, and again, guilty pleasure kind of read. Then we have Practice Makes Perfect by Sarah Adams. This is one of my absolute favourite romances of all time. Sarah Adams is a great romance writer, and I absolutely love this book. And I also think it's really hard for me to give like a romancer 5 stars, just because I think I'm very picky, and I think a lot of it, because I read a lot of it, is very similar. But I think this one was like, again, it was like you could tell there was a difference to it, which was really lovely. And but it was still like ticking all the boxes and all the tropes and things like that. So also the cover is gorgeous, just saying. I love that one too. Then I read Sometimes You Just Need a Pep Talk by Jamie Brockhurst. This was really good. I think a lot of people have tried to do something like this, where it's like read a page a day or 500 quotes to get you through life, and I just don't think any of them execute that very well. I think this was good because it was like, the way it was laid out was like, read this when you need it, and it was like, if you feel this way, then read this, you know, that kind of, I just feel like it was done the right way. So I really enjoyed that, and again, very pretty cover. Then I read Heart of a Dog by Mikhail Bulgakov. Brilliant short story, loved it. Just so like crazy and weird and questionable, and I feel like that's very me. Then Stillborn by Guadalupe Nettle, who I've read several books of this year, and this is my first time reading any of her books, and Stillborn was very emotional, very sad, very tense. As someone who has fertility issues, this was very like hit home almost. Like, I haven't been through what the story is about, but it will make sense when you read it. And I just think like the writing in itself was beautiful. I think it was a new angle of approaching that subject. Yeah, I think it was just really beautiful. Then, where am I going? Tuesdays with Morrie by Mitch Albom. I've read, I think, honestly, like majority Mitch Albom books this year. This is the only one that was a 5-star for me, and I think it's because like his books are so easy. Like the concept, I think, tries to be very deep, and I just think it's not. Like, it is, but it's not. It's not like an intellectual angle of it. But Tuesdays with Morrie is a bit different in the sense of it's an interview with an old man that he was friends with before he died, and I just loved that concept. I've always had a love for like interviewing in books. Then $100 Million Offers by Alex Hormozy. I was going through a phase of reading books about finances. They're really fucking boring. But I enjoyed this one because, again, I think it's so integral to me. Like, I've realized this throughout this year, of my first year of like reading audiobooks, that the author narrates the book, because you can tell that they get their own words. Like, it's just like it comes across exactly how they mean it to come across. And it was almost like quite an emotional book. Yeah, I didn't expect it to be, but it was like meaningful. It was like, it wasn't just make money, here's how you make money. It was like, here's some realistic stories and shit, you know. Then I read Winter in Sokcho by Elisa Schuer-Dusepin, and this is a great example of a book that is written like every other book. I can name 10 books written just like this fucking book, and I hate the writing style. Think K-Ming Chang. Can't stand that writing style anymore, because it tries so desperate to be deep and interesting and unique, and it's not. When all of you are doing it, it is not. Okay? However, this book was very good. I really enjoyed the actual story of this book. I feel like a lot of this writing style comes with stories that just, they're empty and they're stupid and pointless, and this one actually had a story, and I really liked the characters. It was realistic also, like it wasn't just weird for the sake of being weird. Yeah, I just really enjoyed it. It was a good literary kind of break in between everything else. Then Unspeakable Shaking Pleasures by Lucy Debussy. Okay, this was sent to me by the girlies at Orion Publishing, because I got in contact with them, we were speaking, we were just like literally just having conversation about like books, like just everything. It wasn't even like a, can I request this book? It was literally just a chat, and they were like, okay, we're gonna send you a box of books we think you will enjoy based on what we've spoken about. And I was like, are you kidding me? It was like an early birthday present. I loved it, and I love personal relationships like that in the industry, because that doesn't happen often at all. This was my favorite book out of the lot, and actually I'm still reading from this box because I have so many books on my TBR, and this was like the first one I got to, and it was just beautiful. It's basically like a short story erotica collection, and it was so weird. There were bits, okay, if you read it and you're like, what the fuck is this girl, why is my hair doing this? You're like, what the fuck is this girl into? I'm not into any of that. I just think like it was very clearly women written, women centered erotica, and it also wasn't following the Wattpaddy dynamic of he must be this way, she must be this way. It was so complex, and there was weird subjects in there like incest and stuff, but it was just the way it was written was just fucking, it was stunning. It was just fucking beautiful, and highly recommend reading it if you like contemporary fiction and don't mind themes of erotica. Then I read Secret Voices by Sarah Griswold. This is, if you have seen this book, it's this fucking big, it's massive, but it's literally, the concept of this is so me, and it got sent to me again, and I just love when publishers send me books that they're like, Mia would like this, and they're so spot on. Basically the concept of this book is, it's each day of the year in diary entries by real women from hundreds of years ago to present day. So think like fucking the Queen, and I'm trying to think of other like famous fucking people. Just think like old poets, like the first lesbian writers that were, you know, like everything. And then to like Emma Thompson, basically. It was just so, again, women-centric and real and raw and honest, because it was diary entries, so obviously it was, but it was also like so interesting to see how each individual woman wove their stories together. It was like, you know, you had black women, Latino women, white women, and then you also had queer women and straight women. You had women from the 1600s to the 2000s, and it was just like the story of a woman is so woven together. It's not identical, obviously. I can say that as a queer woman. Obviously my experience is very different to a straight woman, same with race, etc. But I just think being a woman connects us on such a level, and I think that this book showed that, and it was a brilliant representation of that, without that even being the purpose, because it wasn't written, it was literally just extracts of diary entries. So I think that was just stunning. I recommend it to everyone that I can, to be honest. Then The Kiss Quotient by Helen Huang. This one, I was so excited to read this, and I loved it more than I thought I would. Again, I have a thing when books are like so highly rated. Like this was popular in what, 2020? 2021? And I've just read it. I was like, I'm not reading this until the hype dies down, because I don't trust any of you bitches on TikTok especially. Fuck you guys. Absolute ass taste. But this one hit. This one hit. So I've also like just got the ebooks of Beach Read, The Unhoneymooners, you know, all those that like, oh, what was the other one? The Hating Game. I'm very excited to read that one. So if any of those let me down, I'm blaming you guys again. Then I read The Penance of the Byronic Hero by Paula McKenna, who is actually my lovely, lovely friend. Highly recommend going and supporting her. She is an incredible writer and poet. And I'm also like not a fan of poetry really, but this slapped. And I don't just say that because she's my friend. It was amazing. Then we get to my favorite book of the year, Little Weirds by Jenny Slate. I'm actually also reading Lifeform by Jenny Slate, which is also going to be a 5 stars. I haven't put on this list because I haven't finished it yet, but it will be a 5 star. I'm telling you that now. I'm like 50% through. Little Weirds is a memoir, and the way Jenny Slate writes is so like beautiful and like internal monologue, but like as if your thoughts are written down perfectly instead of like coherently. You know, like when you have a deep thought, you try to like make it coherent, especially if you're saying it to someone else. You're like, okay, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm thinking. Instead, she just writes it like it's gibberish, and I love it. I love her so much. Not to mention my Jenny Slate tattoo. That is Marcel the Shell, who she voices. I love this woman with like every fiber of my fucking being, and this book is just a fucking must read. It's like a proper like weird girl book, because she is a weird girl. It's not a fiction, it's not a trying to be weird, it's genuine weird girl, and I love that. I love Jenny Slate so much. Lifeform is also very similar. I think it's almost like Little Weird Lifeform. It's like one chapter of her life, another chapter of her life. But what I love is that it's not a coherent story, and it doesn't follow like a timeline. It's literally just thoughts that she's had. And again, please, if you read any book as an audiobook, let it be Jenny Slate's books, because Jenny Slate herself, again, I'm telling you now, narrates it herself, okay? The way this woman narrates her books is so like outstanding, and also, again, like I said, the gibberish in your brain is like she just translates it stunningly in how she says it. But also in life form, which I will do a full fucking review on because I'm loving it so much at the moment. Life form, there's a chapter, right? And I'm assuming in the physical book it would be in like all caps, exclamation marks, right? And like people who read that are like, where is the literary grammar police kind of type shit? And I get that, because when you're reading it, it doesn't come across the way it's being said. She screams it in the audiobook. She fully fucking screams in the audiobook. I was having a shower listening to this audiobook, and all I hear is screaming, and I'm like, who the fuck died? And I was like, it was Jenny Slate, like reading this like this tiny chapter in her book, just screaming. I was like, she's a pioneer, okay? That woman is a fucking genius, and you need to just listen to the audiobooks. Just, if you ever listen to one audiobook in your life, let it be life form, but you have to read Little Weirds first. I don't care if it's physical or not, but if you, life form has to be audiobook, because the screaming chapters got me. Then I read Business Casual by 𝙂𝙧𝙧𝙀. This was very hyped. I think I got it as an ebook. I don't know why I said it like that. But I think I got it as an ebook at first, and then I bought a copy. What I do is, what I do is I read an ebook or an audiobook, because usually they're free, like they'll come with my Spotify subscription, or on NetGalley, like, you know, I get sent ebooks by publishers and stuff. And if I love them, like 5-star love them, I'll secondhand buy copies, which I did with both Little Weirds and Business Casual so far. And yeah, it was just like a perfect romance. It ticked all the boxes. I wouldn't say it was my favorite romance of the year or at all. I've already told you some of those, but more is to come. But it was still like really good, and I couldn't really find a fault with it. I also do think I read a previous 𝙂𝙧𝙧𝙀 which wasn't as good, so I know like what that looks like when it comes to 𝙂𝙧𝙧𝙀 and her writing and her stories. But yeah, Business Casual deserved the hype that it got. Then I read MILF by Paloma Faith. Okay, Paloma Faith deserves all her flowers for this book. I was reading this, and it's, if you can't tell, MILF, it's about her being a mum, and the entire time I was like, oh my god, so relatable, like I'm a mum. That's what she had me like, because she was talking about like the systemic issues of like being a woman, being famous, being like working for yourself but having a child, you know, like all these dynamics that I don't get. I have no relation to them whatsoever, apart from being a woman, of course. But it was the way that she wrote it. I was like, oh, period. I was like, the fact that she's making me have these reactions at all shows that it was written so well. You know, there was also like a sense of massive vulnerability as like a famous woman, like a woman in the public eye. She would talk about like shitting on the toilet with her door open so she could see her child shitting in its nappy, you know, like it was, and like stuff about her ex and like just dynamic relationships. And it was just like, I love when a celebrity is a person. Okay, so I love this. Such an important read, especially if you want to be a mum, which I do, which is why I was like, give me this book. And yeah, I also just think like a lot of memoirs are very American, because, you know, if it's an American writing, of course, but it's like a British woman. It was so like British, so it really hit home as well. It was like just very relatable in that sense. Then I read How Can I Help You by Laura Sims, which was sent to me. At this point in time, this is like June, I'd say, maybe. Yeah, around June. At this point, I'm getting picky about what I'm being sent because I'm getting sent a lot. Looking at all my books, there's like 400 books over there that I can't even look at because it makes me overwhelmed and anxious. But How Can I Help You? I was like, okay, I'll read this. Like, yes, I'll say yes to this one. But I was still like on the edge because I didn't know what to expect. Because also, like, even though I love true crime so much, you would think I would like crime fiction, but I don't. I think because also they follow a lot of like the thriller horror vibes, and like, although true crime is fucking horrifying, it's not for like shock value, right? It's like real fucking life. And so when it's a proper crime fiction and it isn't like, I fucking hate shit about like burglaries and stuff, like that's just, it's so dead to me. This one was about murder, and I just loved this whole thing. There was no writing that was there purely for shock factor. It was a genuine like mind-numbing brain like story where the characters were so realistic and it was scary. Like, it was like, shit, like you could be in this situation at any point in time. That's terrifying. So yeah, I loved how this was done. I think it was brilliant. And it's the only crime fiction I've read this year, and also the only crime fiction I think I've ever enjoyed, really. We're like not even halfway through. I also, mid-rant, I've seen a lot of posts about like people who like rate loads of books 5 stars. They just like anything. And it's like, no, I know what I like. I read mostly what I like. And I also think like the rating system in my head is like super different for each individual book, especially if the genre is different. Like a 5-star literary fic is not the same as a 5-star romance. It just means they've reached the best of the ability that they could in that genre for me. And also I enjoyed it, and that's what's important. Anyways, speaking of which, Blue Hour by Tiffany Clark Harrison is very similar to Stillborn, but actually more interesting almost, just because it was a shorter story and written more sparsely. Like, it wasn't like full chunks of text, and also you don't know the name of the protagonist at all, I think. Not even until the end, I don't think. So it was like these people who don't actually have identities outside of their fertility problems. I loved this. I think it was brilliant. I think, again, this subject is just so like, it's such a subject that needs to be gently cradled, and I don't think it is in like conversations in life and like some romances and stuff. So reading lit fic on it this year has been like eye-opening for me, because it's been really interesting to see, like, whilst it's fiction, like women's genuine experiences, because I think like a lot of these people have actually gone through what they're writing about, and so I think like that's really important in general. Then of course, Before We Forget Kindness by Toshikazu, why did I write it like that? Toshikazu Kawaguchi. If you don't know me, this is my favorite series. It's so fucking cute. I love it. Just perfect little cozy read. Then I read Potions and Proposals, which I had low standards for, because I feel like a lot of fantasy these days is like so fucking watered down, and like I prefer genuinely like a Wattpaddy fantasy, because the girlies these days are doing way too fucking much, and it at the same time as it being watered down. Don't know how they do it, but they do. This, however, was so cute. It was a romantasy, and I love a good little romantasy. But it was just so fun. There was a genuine little plot line, but there wasn't like 10,000 worlds trying to be built and then like miscommunication and like love triangles, and it was just like a clear story, a clear love story, clear connection, and I loved that. It was really sweet. Then I read From Individual to Empire by Laura Ball. Again, this is what I mean about the rating system. This is not going to be a 5-star for someone who isn't in the industry that I'm in. I'm in social media, so this is like for people in social media, PR, people who have their own like companies, businesses, self-employed, or famous, essentially, because she does speak a lot about famous people. And like I resonated with everything she was saying. It was so interesting. It was really cool for me to listen to. But if you have like no interest in this, it's not going to be a 5-star for you, you know? Mornings with My Cat Me by Mayumi Inaba. This fucking broke my heart, bitch. I don't need to say anything except it's a sad story about a cat, okay? Then The Myth of Sisyphus by Albert Camus. Albert Camus is a great writer, and I'm really excited to read more of his stuff. He was also quoted in a recent 5-star of mine that I'll also speak about, which was, actually I'll just speak about it now. It's called Every Time They Find the Meaning of Life, They Change It. And it's really about like, not atheists, but like hedonists, and what's the word when they don't believe in God, but because atheists and agnostics, there you go, agnostics, which I fully think I am. And yeah, Albert Camus was quoted a lot in this, so both just great work that I really agree with. Then I read 𝙀𝙀 by Nathaniel Cohen, and Nathaniel himself sent this to me, and also first book, which was really good. It was a 4-star though, because, and I gave this feedback, because it didn't follow like a singular thick plot line, and Nathaniel has this writing that is stunning and really lends itself to a thick singular plot line. So it was brilliant, the first one, but 𝙀𝙀 is like one fictional novel, and it was just such a unique story, and I just think that Nathaniel has such an incredible way of writing and way of pulling together stories. It's almost like, and I'll say this again, I know I'll repeat myself because this is my favorite kind of writing, and I've found several authors this year who write like this, but it's almost like bringing classic way of writing, like literally think 1800s way of writing with a modern touch, but done successfully. And I think that's really hard to do. As a writer, I would not know how to do that. I couldn't do that for the life of me, even if I want to, which, you know, would be great. I would love to be able to do that. It's my favorite type of writing to read, and he has done that just so fantastically, and I just think like all of Nathaniel's work needs to be read, seriously. Then I got sent the ebook, which makes me sad because this one needed to be a fucking physical book. I will get my hands on it from these publishers who sent me the ebook. The Worlds of Wes Anderson by Adam Woodward. If you don't know, Wes Anderson stan right here. And I have like literally every Wes Anderson book you could possibly think about. And yeah, this one was fab. Great. No complaints. Loved it. Brilliant. Then I read Since We're Here by Chrissy Hopewell. I really wasn't enjoying this in the first like 15% of it, and then the rest, it got so much better. It was an absolute page turner. Loved it. Loved that it was set in Ireland. Like, just, yeah, it was so fun. I've also read another of Chrissy Hopewell's, but it was a short story and I didn't like it at all. But this one was really good, written lovely as well. Now we're really getting into like the best of the best. Like since like September, I've been reading like the best books ever, in my opinion. Starting with This Fatal Kiss by Alicia Jasinska. I love when someone writes a book and it's fictional, but they implement their genuine culture into it. And I don't mean in like the like typical way of like, oh, it's lit fic, of course they're going to talk about like the culture of being, for this is an example, Mexican, through standard ways, because their character is Mexican, they're a Mexican writer, etc. This was like full on like folklore fantasy, and she's Polish, so she put genuine Polish culture and folklore into this. Like, you know, it was so clear that it wasn't like, oh, I need to search this folklore up. It was like from the fucking heart. I love this story, and I don't like YA like at all, but this was just a perfect little fantasy folklore YA that was just stunning writing and stunning cover as well, like fucking beautiful. So if you like YA and you like fantasy, even if you just like fantasy, it wasn't YA enough to be like, ew, this is just YA. So I highly recommend reading this. I'm a lover of folklore when done right, and this was done right. Then I've literally been here for like an hour doing this. Then No Credit River by Zoe Whittle. Zoe Whittle followed me the other day on Instagram. I had a heart attack. You don't understand. 2 of my top 5 books. Okay, my top 5 books. I actually posted this on Instagram as like a Spotify Wrapped, which was inspired by my friend Dan Reed's books on Instagram. Oh my god, Lana Del Rey and Ray Matt. Bitch. Oh my god, my world's colliding. Shit. Anyways, as I was saying, my recent post on Instagram, my top 5s. Little Weirds at number 1, Not in My Book by Katie Holes number 2, again, which I'll get into. Collide by 𝙑𝙑, which I'll get into, as 3. Love and the Downfall of Society by Melinda Kopp, 4. And No Credit River by Zoe Whittle, number 5. No Credit River, I tagged Zoe Whittle and she fucking followed me from this, and I pooped myself. It's a memoir, but it's written like so poetically. I think it's clear now, like if someone asks me, if you don't know, I say this all the time, my favorite book ever, Just Kids by Patti Smith. I'm getting a Patti Smith tattoo soon. I have a Jenny Slate tattoo. Like, books written by women in a style that is like poetic and not neat and stunningly real, like their heart is so fucking poured into it, is my favorite type of book. Like, I love romance so much. I love contemporary lit fic. I love women's lit fic. I love like art books. I love fantasy. I love these books so much, but that will always be my ultimate fucking kind of book. And No Credit River was one of those books. So like that's why like Just Reads, Little Weirds and Life Form by Jenny Slate, and then No Credit River by Zoe Whittle, like those are like my top memoirs ever. They are just fucking stunning and so necessary to read. Like, just as a woman, so necessary to read, but also so poetic, just stunning. Then I read The Vagus Nerve Reset by Anna Ferguson, which is funny to me because it's about PTSD and I have PTSD. I have another book like this with like an identical fucking title. Both of them came out this year, different people. This topic I love reading about it. It's important for me to read about it. It's important for me to heal. And I think when you can find a good book that helps you do that, period. And that's what that was. I love a book about PTSD specifically. I think like mental health is way too broad of a subject to just write about simply. It's not a simple thing. And again, this comes into the rate system, because it's like if I were to read about ADHD, I'm sure the book would be great, but I would have no connection or relativity to that book, whereas PTSD, I do. So I love this, it was great. There was also another book, I don't think I put this here. I did put it, but I didn't say it. I skipped right over it. You mug, Mia, where is it? There it is, Invisible Loss. That was what I missed, by Christina Rasmussen. So glad I noticed that, because I remembered in this moment about that book. Those two both about PTSD, grief, emotional abuse, just like everything I've been through. And both were just stunningly perfectly written. The first, like, Invisible Loss is more like the emotional side of things, but still non-fiction. And the Vagus Nerve Reset is more the science aspect of things, but still emotional. So I just think if you need to read these or want to read these because you relate, read both of them. I think they're really good, especially back to back. Then we have Love and the Downfall of Society by Melinda Kopp. Again, Melinda Kopp follows me. Let's not talk about this. Melinda followed me because I read her book on NetGalley, gave it 5 stars. I was like, this is my favorite book ever in my whole life. It wasn't an exaggeration, it's a brilliant fucking book. And then she emailed me from that and was like, can I send you a physical copy? And I was like, yes, please. And then now she follows me on Instagram, we follow each other, and she's actually gonna send me the, like, it's not a sequel, but like the sequel, the next book in the series, which is technically a sequel, but it's not because it's a romance. Anyways, so the initial story is, it's set in like the early 1900s, I believe. I could be very wrong about that. It's a romance, and it's about a writer, and the romance in and of itself, like by itself, I wouldn't have loved this book so much, because it's literally about a dumb dick. This guy's stupid as fuck, but they have this intense connection. He gets scared by that. He doesn't fight for the connection, even though he loves her, but he keeps chasing her even though he's not like pursuing her. Yeah, it's like, on paper it's like, I would hate this. I would hate this. But what I loved about this was the main character, I believe her name was Charlotte, I think. Let me look it up, because I want to Charlotte or Emily. Just like a basic white girl name. It's based in France as well, so it was so like un-American, which I needed. Yeah, it was Charlotte, see, I was right. Yeah, what I loved was that Charlotte was such a fucking little feminist, but like in like such an unperformative way. I mean, it's a fictional character, but you know what I mean, like she wasn't written to be like, oh, she's a feminist. It was just, she fucking had so much love for herself that she knew what to do about every situation, even if it hurt her. And I loved that. And then obviously it's a happy ever after, it's a romance. So I loved this book. I think it was brilliant. And it was such a must read, especially if you like period pieces, like period romances. Yeah, it was brilliant. I loved it. Then I read All About Love by Bell Hooks. I knew I'd love this one. Brilliant. I don't think there's much to say. I think it was very accurate. Then I read The Destiny book by Helena Lind. This was really interesting. As someone who's literally just like self-proclaimed agnostic, I used to be very, very, very spiritual. I'm still kind of spiritual, kind of, but I used to be extreme. And I had like the last 2 years like such a battle with spirituality, and also this concept of like destiny and fate, and if it's meant to be, it'll be, and everything happens for a reason. Like all these things I used to believe in, I had such a battle with it, both personal reasons, but also just like seeing the world as it is. I was like, this is just too much. And like the reason in the first place that I never believed in God almost became the reason I stopped believing in spirituality. But this was really interesting because it was like spirituality for people with a brain. I say that because I was like so immersed into this community online that was so toxically spiritual. It was literally like, if you've been raped, it happened for a reason. It was like, I hate you all. You are so like the opposite of what this is meant to be. So the Destiny book was like a level-headed kind of explanation behind destiny and fate and things that I do still believe in, but with like an explanation that makes sense, basically. So I love that. Overtime by Mary Loyal. This was a surprising 5-star for me, because I'll explain why. I read her first book, I think it was called Face Off. Easily a 3-star at best. This one, much better, but also main character had PCOS, and I loved that. And it was done really well. You know, it wasn't like just a character trait or like even like something to propel the plot. It was a genuine thing that this character had, and I loved that. As a girly with PCOS, I loved that. Okay guys? Then my gorgeous lovely friend Sylvia gifted me Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell for my birthday, and I only got around to reading it in like October. Didn't expect to love it because these aren't, again, the types of books that I just pick up by myself. I loved it. It was really good. Written stunningly. Then I read Dear Love by Sarah Barber. Tears. Sarah Barber is my favourite photographer in the world. She literally was my inspiration throughout my photography classes and course in sixth form. She inspired like all of my work and is the reason I like pass it with a sort of high B. Then I fucking bumped into her randomly on my last day, like the morning before my flight in LA last year. She's also a Palestinian photographer. Yeah, it's just a fucking beautiful book, and I am biased. I don't care. It's fucking beautiful. Similar to that, I read Spike by Spike Lee, which is like a book all about Spike Lee, the director's movies. Again, big time fan, film degree nerd over here. So again, I'm very biased. Loved it. Then finally, Not in My Book by Katie Holt. Katie Holt commented on that post that I spoke about, which made me fucking cry, because this is seriously like, it was my second favorite book of the year. This was just such a perfect romance. I have no other way of putting it. It was such a perfect romance. It was written well. It was like reading in like an early 2000s rom-com. The characters were just like perfectly fleshed out. Nothing was forced. I loved it. It was brilliant. Then I read Harley Strangers by A.C. Robinson, and listen, a lot of people don't like this book. The reason I liked it, and again, this is what I mean about the rating system, is that I'm so biased because this situation has happened to me. So I read it, I was like, oh my god, this is my life, I'm gonna, and just like crying my eyes out at the end of it. It's basically about two people who just meet and fall in love instantaneously, and they both have like their baggage, and they just spend one night together, and it's super intense that they like fight even though they've just met. And I remember reading the reviews and people were like, this isn't realistic, this doesn't happen. It was almost like there was no reason for this to happen. Let me tell you, as someone who went through that for 3 years, I assure you it happens. And it is that instantaneous, and it is that intense, and you think there's no reason, but feelings are the reason. Like, the emotions are the reason. And I don't expect most people to understand that, because most people aren't, I want to use the word lucky enough to experience those intense emotions. It's hell and back at first when it's like that. When things calm down and everything's good, it's the most beautiful love on the planet. And this was like the immediate like intensity rather than this like love story. So I loved that because I just related to it. It was well written. I just connected with it on a level that I don't think most people will, which is fine. Then me and my granddad buddy read Attached by Emil Levine. He read it in Greek, I read it in English. It was really good. Exactly what I expected it to be. It reached all my expectations. Then I read Toxic Productivity by Isra Nazir. This was also really good. I've read a lot of books on like toxic striving, toxic thriving, like a lot of books coming out with very similar titles this year about similar subjects, but I read them because I like the subject. This one was the best one for sure. Collide and Spiral by 𝙁𝙗𝙗. Collide was my favorite, but they were both definitely 5 stars. They were stunning. I love 𝙁𝙗𝙗. She is my #1 romance writer now. It kind of goes 𝙁𝙗𝙗, Sarah Adams, and although I've only read one book, Katie Holt and Melinda Kopp. So like Melinda Kopp and Katie Holt need to like release more for their like roles in that line to be like cemented, you know. Just perfect romances, like literally nothing I can complain about in either of them. Then I read Bittersweet by Lottie Bowser, which was again a memoir, but this one was just very emotional. It was about this woman who has been with this man for 6 years and he dies from cancer. Yeah, it broke my heart. That's all I can say. I think it was a 5 star because it was very well written. You can tell the author put so much of her heart and like vulnerability into it. It was just heartbreaking. Accurate title. Finally, Wall Gathering and Seventh Heaven by Patti Smith. I literally, if you guys haven't seen, I put a TikTok up about this, but there is someone on book Twitter, I can't remember the username, I think I reposted it though, and it's under the hashtag #PoetVoir, like VOIR, who is releasing books, like ebooks, for free for everyone in several languages, and I love this fucking person because I just think it's incredible for them to do this for people. I think, you know, a lot of the authors that they're releasing are deceased anyway, so it's not like you're taking much away from anyone, and it's for people who can't afford it and other accessibility reasons. And yeah, Patti Smith, as you all know, is my favourite author of all time. So Wall Gathering and Seventh Heaven were really good, and Seventh Heaven you can't even buy in like bookstores here, so again I would not have access to that in general unless I got it through his ebook, which I did. I think that I've only given Patti Smith like 1 4-star. I can't remember which one it is. I think it was M Train, I think, or the monkey one, I can't remember, or both of them, but everything else she's ever written has been 5 stars. So ending on that, this is a very long video. I vote a lot 5 stars, but if you think about it, I read 200 books this year, so kind of valid, and I try not to read books that I wouldn't like. So I love you guys, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed this. If you've read any of these or would like to, let me know down below. You can follow me on socials to keep up to date with this, because I do talk about all of these whilst I'm reading them most of the time, especially if I love them. And I will see you in next week's video. Bye.